Back in 2018, I was speaking with my friend Ross Golding about life after retirement. Ross is a very successful radiologist in Reno, Nevada, and was going crazy without working. He heard about the Oyster World Rally, a year-and-a-half organized sailing trip with about 30 oyster yachts leaving Antigua in the Caribbean in January 2022 to sail around the world. But when he called them to inquire about it, the only issue was he needed to own an oyster. So they very conveniently sold him a brand new Oyster 565 to be completed in the fall of 2021. I shamelessly invited him to come sailing in San Francisco with myself and Jim Simon, my sailing partner on our Beneteau 38 timeshare. Jim and I obviously wanted to let him observe our sailing skills to wrangle an invitation to help him get his new boat across the Atlantic in time for the start of the rally. It worked. Here are the issues. The boat was not going to be completed until sometime in October 2021. When crossing the Atlantic, remember that hurricane season doesn't end until the end of November. And the boat had to be in shape to leave Antigua to join the rally on a starting date of January 9th, 2022. So the window was between November and December for us to do this. This is an Oyster 565. It's a 57-foot center cockpit sloop with total state-of-the-art technology aboard, including 3 staterooms, one with a king bed for Ross in the stern, another with a queen bed for Fabian Fischon and his wife Daniela Brunn, our professional skipper and first mate cook, in the bow, and one with 2 bunks for Jim and myself, the crew. The sail in front is the jib. The large sail in the middle is the mainsail, which is supported by the mast going upward and the boom extending from the mast rearward. The lines keeping all of this stuff in place are called the rigging. So what is it about sailing that's so enticing? It's an ancient transportation system. It's completely based on managing free energy from wind and currents with nothing more than your brain and a bit of muscle. We've had useful knowledge of the Atlantic since Columbus took off in 1492. It's an ultimate survival skill and one hell of a bucket list adventure. A few minutes on the basics of sailing. If you look at this picture, you'll see that a boat can sail in many directions with respect to the wind, but not directly into it. In reality, we pretty much avoid sailing 45 degrees on either side of the source of the wind. That gives us an easy 270 degrees of ocean to sail in. Looking forward on a boat, the right side is starboard and the left side is port. There are 4 letters in left and 4 letters in port to help you remember which is which. Looking at the 4 boats on the left side of this picture, you will note that the sail is over the port side at increasing angles the farther the boat is from the direction of the wind. That means that the wind is coming over the boat on the starboard side. We call that a starboard tack. Looking at the second boat from the top on the left, if we want to change its direction to that of the second boat from the top on the right, we would have to steer the boat into the wind and go from a starboard tack to a port tack. Changing tack is called tacking, and changing tack by steering into the wind is called coming about. The risk of coming about is not doing it rapidly enough and having the boat stop when it's pointing directly into the wind. That's called being caught in the irons. Now, looking at the second boat from the bottom on the left, if we want to change its direction to that of the second boat from the bottom on the right, we would have to steer the boat away from the direction of the wind and go from a starboard tack to a port tack. That tacking maneuver by steering away from the wind is called a jibe. The risk of jibing is that if it is done without the proper preparation and teamwork, the wind can catch the sail on the other side and swing it over with such force that the boom could bring down the rigging, or more importantly, injure or kill a crew member when the boom hits his or her head. We call that a crash jibe. So let's talk about wind and currents. The rotation of the Earth from east to west causes molecules of water and air to appear to move in a clockwise manner in the northern hemisphere and a counterclockwise direction in the southern hemisphere. It's not that the molecules of air and water are moving so much, but rather that the Earth is moving under them. We've all experienced how cold the Pacific Ocean is in Santa Monica and how warm the Atlantic is in New York. That's because the water in the Pacific comes down from Alaska, creating the California Current, and the water in the Atlantic comes up from the tropics, creating the Gulf Stream. The wind follows the same directions. So here are the modern routes taken to cross the Atlantic by taking advantage of the clockwise wind rotation in the northern hemisphere. If you want to come from Europe to America, you sail to the Canary Islands, and then hitch a ride with the wind and currents pushing you down towards the Caribbean. To go the opposite direction, you would sail up to Bermuda and then over to the Azores and then over to Europe. These winds are all called the trade winds. And that is exactly what Columbus did on all 4 of his voyages. Now, he didn't have anything close to an accurate clock, so his readings have to be taken with a very large grain of salt. But for the most part, these reconstructed routes make a lot of common sense. Ross, Fabian, and Daniela picked up his boat in England in October, sailed it down the English Channel to France, and then, when the weather was right, crossed the Bay of Biscay and made it to the Canary Islands in early November. Okay, guys, so it is, what time is it? What day is it? It's Wednesday, November 10th. It's about 2:30 in the afternoon. We left Madrid. We got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. We got to our hotel, and our room's not available till 2, and we've been wandering around this marina here, which is in Las Palmas in Gran Canary Island, and we're waiting to greet Infinity with Ross and the rest of the crew that should be arriving within the next 20 minutes. We'll help tying her up. So just want to say the beginning of the adventure is now. Picking up a brand new boat from the factory is not like getting a brand new car. The complexities of boat construction are so overwhelming that numerous shakedown cruises are necessary to uncover multiple minor or major issues. By the time they met us in the Canaries, some significant repairs and improvements were identified. Oyster sent a team down to lend a hand. We needed to rig a second jib halyard and block at the masthead, as we were sailing directly downwind and were going to use 2 jibs instead of a jib and mainsail. We had to fashion a block at the end of the boom to allow it to act as a spinnaker pole for the port jib. We needed to repair the autopilot and also had to repair a hydraulic fluid leak. Here Jim is watching Ross tie a bowline to secure himself to his harness before being cranked up the mast to install the new block.
Okay? Yep. Feeling good?
You got your wire crossed up there. You okay? Yeah. Okay.
You're fine?
Yeah. About right, Larry?
Looks right. Stop.
Meanwhile, we had plenty of time to wander around the island and observe lots of very interesting bathing suits. We figured it would take us 15 to 20 days to get across, so we needed enough food to last us 30 days. Keeping this stuff fresh was a challenge. The next week was spent improving our sailing skills while sailing westward within the Canaries. We had to learn some advanced boat systems, communication and navigation reviews, and complete our provisioning. Unfortunately, Daniela had a family emergency that required her to return to Germany and not see us again until we arrived in Antigua. But we were so very lucky that her close friend, Carola Paul, flew out to be our cook and all-around positive attitude crew member. Finally, on November 27th, we cast off for Antigua around 6 p.m. Jim drew the first watch from 6 to 9 p.m. That's the island of La Gomera in the background, where Columbus took off from. We were divided into 3 watches. Ross was solo. Fabian stood watch with both Jim and myself for the first week. After that, we went to 4 watches, with Carola assisting at night most of the time. The handoff protocol is clear. What's the wind direction and speed? What's the proper boat heading to hold to? The sea state, and were there any issues that happened over the prior 3 hours? Once you are relieved of your watch, you then chart into the logbook at the navigation station below. The only rule that counts: don't be late for your watch. Today is day 3. We are in the trades. That's our flag blowing behind us. What we're seeing now is a special kind of rig where we have twin head sails. The port head sail is coming through the boom, and the starboard head sail is coming through the spinnaker pole, which you can't see with this view, but I'm holding on. That is Ross at the helm. I'm about to take the helm in about another 30 minutes, a 3-hour run. Okay? Here's the starboard head sail going through our spinnaker pole. The wind is approximately 180 degrees. It's a dead run. Basically, this configuration allows us to go 40 degrees either side of 180 and still keep our speed at about 8 to 9 knots with the wind behind us running at about 22 knots. On the third day, we experienced a sobering event. We had onboard internet connectivity that gave us email capability in a very limited manner. The network reported that there had been a mayday situation on a boat about 300 miles north of us. It was an Italian racer with a crew of 3. They had a crash jibe, and one crew member was killed. They were rescued by an ocean liner and abandoned their boat. Crash jibes are real. Taking a video?
Yeah.
All right.
So tell us something, Larry.
Well, so this is our third day. We are learning to live without sleep because we're on for 3 hours straight and then off for 6 through the 24-hour clock. That's about it.
What's the sea state?
This is a calm sea state. The wind is 21 knots behind us. You don't want to have 21 knots in front of you. It's no fun. So we're steering course directly west, taking us straight out to Caribbean.
Right.
We've been going for 3 days straight now. Eating like kings.
Yeah.
I just came off watch, sitting here in the main salon. Down there is the galley. That's where Ross's room is. There's Jim at the helm. It's our washing machine, the nav station, and the other rest of the salon. The covers are on the cushions for a crossing. That's Ross, Jim, and myself eating steak, peas, and potatoes. Along with freshly baked bread, nothing low carb about this voyage. The challenge when fishing was slowing the boat down to keep from losing the fish or the fishermen. That required furling the headsails down to the bare minimum that would allow steerage and try to get our speed down from 8 to 4 knots. We caught mahi-mahi. Fabian and Ross filleted it like pros. And then Carola made us really good ceviche. That's myself at the helm, clipped onto the boat with my tether. The instruments are configurable to show us the angle of the wind with respect to the boat, our heading, the boat speed, and a bunch of other calculations. The old-school compass on the right provided security, especially at night. Above the companionway are 3 repeater displays that show our heading, wind angle, and boat speed. Around 3 a.m. one night, I had just relieved Ross at the helm. While charting at the nav station, he saw that our AIS system identified an impending head-on collision in 20 minutes. I confirmed it on our system at the helm. The system told us that it was a freighter with its name, speed, and course. We contacted it on VHF channel 16. He confirmed that he saw us and told us he was altering his course 5 degrees to starboard. We followed his position on the chart plotter, and 20 minutes later we saw his lights far off into the distance on our left. Sailing at night is challenging and fun. I just came off watch. I don't know if you can see any of this. It's Jim Corolla in watch. I forgot to turn on my flash. I just came off watch. It's Jim Corolla. Here we go. Yours truly after a watch. Fabian was mastering his old school navigation with sextant readings. I was at the helm when I heard a loud bang and saw that the main sheet block had broken off at the end of the boom. We had run the port jib sheet through it, as there was no other place for that line to go. Now the risk was that the boom could swing freely and possibly hit the rigging and bring down the mast. I needed to head into the wind so Fabian could secure the boom, but we were running twin headsails, so heading into the wind was extremely problematic. Corolla came up with her camera and caught us towards the end of this event. This was an example of teamwork. After calling all hands on deck and describing what had happened, I turned on the engine for extra safety. I was having a problem heading in as the sails were in the absolutely wrong position. With a prompt from Jim, I realized that I needed more power from the engine. But when I moved over to the port helm station, where the engine controls were, I lost my awareness of my position relative to the wind while I was focused on my gauges for just a few milliseconds.
I got it now. I got it. Cheers, take it.
Ross recognized my hesitation, took over at the helm, increased the engine's RPM, and brought us into the wind. I relinquished the helm and responded to Fabian's request for a winch handle to crank in the boom. And then you can see me sitting at the starboard helm, reliving my mistakes.
Jim, can you close the hatch in the saloon so any water over?
So, let's think about this.
No, we took first we take
How many
fire? No, the hatch in the saloon, the forward-looking hatch is open.
Here's the teamwork lesson. Leave your ego on the dock when you cast
Release
off.
that before.
Yeah.
Okay. You able to get that?
Take you out, take the helm.
Okay.
And then came the squalls. As we got down into the tropical latitudes, the temperature increased and it was shorts and t-shirt weather. However, global warming has increased the water temperature minimally. That change is just enough to increase the density of water in those beautiful clouds we observed during the day.
Nice weather.
When the temperature fell at night, those clouds emptied their contents onto us with high-speed winds to 30 knots along with icy rain. We had to sweat inside our foul weather gear, but at least we had Corolla to keep us laughing.
Wow. Oh my god.
On this clip, you'll notice that the rain is so dense that it actually flattens the waves. And here's the reality. Sailing is one hell of a lot of fun.
We don't need these in. Hopefully not. Yeah. Excuse me.
At last, landfall in Antigua. From left to right, that's myself, Carola, Ross, Jim, Daniela, and Fabian at a lovely restaurant that Ross took us to on our last evening before flying home. Thanks, Ross, for the adventure of a lifetime. These are the actual GPS readings of our trip from the Canary Islands to Antigua. It was about 2,700 nautical miles and took us 15 days. So what are the leadership and teamwork lessons I learned from Fabian, Ross, Jim, and Carola? Keep a steady hand on the helm. Carefully explain each anticipated maneuver to each crew member. Repeatedly demonstrate proper ergonomics for each maneuver to prevent injuries. Maintain your ability to accept advice from everyone at all times. Recognize that there are many ways to accomplish a goal. At all times stay calm, upbeat, and friendly. These lessons are actually very applicable throughout multiple organizational settings, but are essential survival skills for life at sea. Thanks a lot.